And so that's how you solve part 2 of the homework assignment. They're laughing because it was very, very easy. Okay, cool. So we will go back to modern cryptography. So we looked at ECB. So what was the core idea behind ECB? Why do we need this? Why can't we just use DES or AES or whatever encryption algorithm?
Because we don't have like the 64 link.
Yeah, so the core idea, what we have is we can take a key. We have this basically black box where we can take a key, we put in data, we get out ciphertext. We actually didn't talk about some of the other properties we want from this black box DES. So what are some things that we want? I think we talked about we shouldn't be able to brute force the key or derive the key directly from the ciphertext. What else? Yeah.
We shouldn't be able to know what the clear text is given this to ciphertext.
We shouldn't be able to, wait, say that again? Yes, so we shouldn't be able to take the ciphertext and go back to the data, the clear text. So it's a one-way without the key. What else? Yeah.
Yesterday there was that like penguin example where even though the ciphertext is like not really related to the clear text, there's still like a pattern that's apparent because of how it was encrypted.
Right, so one thing would be, so the way to think about this is think about through the different types of adversaries. So let's say we have an adversary, a chosen plaintext attacker. So they get to choose their plaintext and get different, get the ciphertext. So in that case, what's their goal?
Deduce the plaintext?
They have the plaintext and the ciphertext.
The key.
The key, to get the key, right? So one of the properties there that would be nice to have, and this will come up again a bit later, is, and this is again not being able to go back from the ciphertext to the data. So what if I change one byte in? So what if I do AAAAA as ciphertext, or as data, and then I get the encryption? And what if I do, actually I don't know if this is 1 byte off, we'll say it's 1 bit off, we'll do BAAAAA, and then encrypt that. What if the ciphertext is only like 1 bit difference?
It's not good.
Not good, it's probably bad, right? Why would it be bad?
Because you know the key.
Because or it could be easy to go from ciphertext to plaintext. If you know that if I change this bit in the data, this bit in the ciphertext changes, you could probably very easily go backwards, which is actually very similar to what we have in like the Caesar cipher or the Visionaire cipher. So you want a 1-bit change in the data to produce basically a completely random ciphertext. That was just something we didn't talk about. But going into these block modes, the core problem is we have 64 bits of data. We often want to apply our encryption algorithms on multiple chunks of data, and so the most natural way to do this is to just split up the input into blocks and then run each of those blocks through DES with K. What's another, so what are some benefits of this approach? Did we talk about that? I don't think so. Yeah.
It's easy.
Easy? Easy to implement, easy to describe? And what other ways is it easy? What does this computation of the last block depend on?
Just the block and the key.
The block and the key? What about this computation in the middle?
Same thing. Just
It's block and its key. What about the first computation?
It's block and its key.
It's block and its key. Could you do all of these in parallel, running them at the same time?
Yes.
Which means you can take advantage of massive parallel computation like GPUs or even modern CPUs that can have 40 cores. And you can run and do each of those blocks in parallel. This is actually one of the major benefits here, is using that. But as we saw, the problem then becomes every block, so given us a specific key K, identical blocks get encrypted to identical ciphertext, right? agree with that?
Yes.
This encryption algorithm is deterministic. If the key is the same and the block is the same, the output must be the same. Otherwise, we couldn't decrypt and we'd have huge problems. And this results in that awesome picture of Tux, the penguin, where you can take the raw byte, the raw RBG values of Tux, you can encrypt him, and you're encrypting this to send somebody this message, and you want nobody else to see what you're sending, but if you just actually look at that image, you can see that every white block has basically been transferred into this gray block, because every block that's identical gets encrypted to the same ciphertext. So you can still see the patterns here at the block level rather than at the granularity of the character, of the image itself. But you can still get an idea of what the message is that's being sent. Does that make sense? Cool. So how did you fix this? Yeah. Or what's the key? Sorry, yes.
Every block is a different key.
Okay, you could make a different key for every block. What size of key do you need then? Would you need a key the same size as the data? Possibly. Yeah.
If we make the
Well, sorry, before thinking about solutions, let's talk about what's the core problem here.
that the ciphertext maps to the same thing, or sorry, that the blocks map to the same ciphertext.
Every block maps the same ciphertext, right? And actually, the nice part that we got with parallelism is actually the downfall here, because all of these things can be computed in parallel, which means none of these blocks actually depend on each other. Cool. Okay, so now solution. What do you think?
If we make it depend on the previous computation in some way, so that way the ciphertext isn't exactly the same.
Right, so we can make it depend on the previous. So one idea would be, well, instead of 1K, let's use NKs, where NK is the number of blocks we have. The problem there is, the kind of nice thing about this is the security of this depends on our key. So now we need N keys that we have to somehow securely transmit to them. And at this point, we're transmitting them N times 56 bits of information securely, when we're trying to communicate to them N times 64 bits of information securely. So at that point, we've kind of already done that. Any other ideas? Yeah.
Just feed the ciphertext in as part of the key for each.
So we could maybe mix this ciphertext in with the key. We could also, another idea would be to mix the ciphertext in with the block. So and actually this is exactly the other style of mode, which is cipher block chaining mode. So the idea is, oh, looks like my XOR is messed up. So you take the first block, you encrypt it with the key K, you get some new ciphertext, you then XOR that ciphertext with the next block, encrypt that to get some ciphertext too. So now what if this block and this block are the same?
It's different. It'll appear different.
It'll be different. The ciphertext will be different, right? And if you have the ciphertext, can you go backwards? What can't you go backwards of here? It seems silly because you have this you have all the ciphertext, so how come you can't derive you're XORing the block with the ciphertext, so how come you can't go backwards?
Because you don't know the key.
You don't know the key. Yeah, exactly. So you think of this as like a one-way trapdoor. You can go through it, but you can't go without the key. You can't go backwards through it. So you can't derive this input. And what is this input? Is this input the block?
No.
The ciphertext?
No.
No, it's the XOR of the block with the ciphertext. And then you just do this. So this is the chaining idea. So now you have this nice property that even if the blocks are different, now the ciphertext, all the ciphertext will be different. Except for what?
The first one?
The first one. Yeah, why would that be a problem?
Because if they thought they knew the key, they could check it with the first block.
So if they think they know the key, well, maybe we'll go and do the reverse, but basically, you have all this ciphertext. You can go backwards and do the decryption. You take the last block, you run it through DES, you XOR it with the previous ciphertext to get the plaintext block, and then you just do that backwards. So if you think you have the key, you can easily do that. So what does this ciphertext correlate to?
The original plaintext.
Specifically the original plain. So think about, what does this ciphertext correlate to?
The previous ciphertext and the plaintext.
Yeah, the previous ciphertext and the plaintext, right? So it's kind of a mixing of both, so it's going to get randomness from this ciphertext. But this ciphertext is coming from where?
Just the plaintext.
Just the plaintext, right? So if you have so now every message, and remember one of the attackers we're kind of thinking about is a plaintext, a chosen plaintext attacker. So I may be able to try to figure out what your block is or what the messages are. So let's say I have some messages I've stolen from you. I think they're saying buy or sell. I could just, with the chosen plaintext attack, I could encrypt buy, encrypt sell, and see which ciphertext match because the key is the same in that case. And then I can easily match those up. So you still have this problem of this first block depends on that. So what do you do?
Good point.
What was it?
So the initial.
So from a concept, and if you think about it, so this one is different. Why? So this one doesn't map one-to-one with exactly that plaintext because what happens?
Think about the XOR again, or?
Yeah, the XOR again, right? So the plaintext is XORed with the previous ciphertext. This ciphertext is different because this block was XORed with this previous ciphertext. This ciphertext is different because this block is XORed with this ciphertext. But what's there to XOR with this block? Nothing. And so the idea is, well, we do want to hide what that first block is. So what if we randomly created a first block and then XORed 64 random bytes with the block and then encrypted that, and then that's that first block. So this is the concept of the IV or the injection vector. Or, no, it doesn't sound for injection vector.
Initialization vector.
There we go, initialization vector. That makes much more sense. Thinking vulnerability analysis. Cool. So the idea is if this is random, then you XOR that with the block, and now what's the relation between the ciphertext and the initial plaintext? Should be no relation. It should be randomized based on that IV, right? So if you're doing the same blocks, as long as you have different injection vectors, then this ciphertext will be different. Yeah.
So, given that's the case, how would you
Initialization
how would
vector. I
you
did it again.
decrypt it if you didn't have that initialization?
So how do you decrypt it? That's a great question.
You have to keep both key and
You need the key and the IV, right? So you have the ciphertext, so you can easily decrypt. So with just the key, you can go backwards, get this block, you have this ciphertext, you get this block, and go backwards, until you get to here, the very last block, you can't decrypt. Well, you can decrypt it, but you need the initialization vector to XOR it to get the original plaintext, right? So to decrypt it, you need the initialization vector and the ciphertext. So now what if somebody sees that communication, steals the initialization vector and the ciphertext? What can they learn?
First block.
The first block, how do they do that? So they have this ciphertext, then they do what?
Or not the first block, but they can determine what the first ciphertext is. But they already have it. So.
They have everything here, right? They have all this ciphertext, they have the initialization vector. They need the key, right? They actually don't have the key. So they can't take the ciphertext block and go backwards to get this to XOR with the initialization vector to then get the original block. Yeah?
But wouldn't it still be vulnerable to a plaintext attack? Yeah, plaintext attack. Just like it was before, that was the whole point of making the IV vector.
Right, okay, so then how would that work? So, oh, wait, let me see. Ah, I see what you're saying. Because you have the IV, you have the ciphertext. Yes, it would definitely not fix that. Okay, so then so let's say not a chosen plaintext attacker. Let's say you collect a bunch of ciphertext and you can separate them into two groups basically based on what they are. Then you could figure out some are buys and some are sells from a side channel or something. So with the initialization vector, you then no longer can tell that the first blocks are the same. And that would prevent that. Yeah, so it actually doesn't prevent a chosen plaintext attacker. Good call. Cool, so now exactly. So now and essentially you can think of it as you're using the same scheme, but you're creating a random block at the start. Yeah?
If we want to guard the initialization vector, wouldn't that also sort of be part of the key? Because
Yes.
we also need to decrypt. Okay.
Exactly. So if this whole scheme relied on keeping the initialization vector secret, then essentially it's part of the key, which we don't want to do because, and we don't need to do, right? Because and the other important thing is this initialization vector is random for every message, and that would mean we can transmit the key once out of band. Now we both have it. Now we can decrypt messages from each other. But if we had to do that per message, send a new piece of information out of band, then it's kind of a waste. Cool. And so this then gets rid of I don't have a picture of him, but this will actually completely scramble Tux, so you can't see anything from it. So, and one of the, so what are some of the pros here we talked about? What are some other pros of this design? Are there any? More secure in that you're not leaking any information about the entire plain text. What else?
You only, two keys? The key and the vector.
You don't have two keys. You just have the key. The initialization vector is public or with the ciphertext. So you would send somebody over a channel where it can be stolen, the initialization vector and the ciphertext. Yeah.
Similar messages don't produce similar ciphertext.
Exactly. Similar messages don't produce similar ciphertext, and even similar blocks within the same plain text will not produce the same ciphertext. Right? So you're kind of, and the whole reason why it's using this and the whole idea is that, and this is why, so this should be again another theme of why cryptography is difficult, because you design this box to be very secure. You've designed this box such that there's no way to map these outputs. So if you're given this ciphertext, you cannot find this input unless you know the key. That's, or I mean, whatever. We'll actually see that's not 100% the case with DES, but whatever. You designed this super securely, but you're using this ECB mode, and you're actually leaking information about your plain text because there's this additional operation of splitting your plain text up into blocks. And how just doing that actually introduces and can undermine the security of your crypto system. Yeah.
So what if the initialization vector is basically public information?
Yes.
What security advantage does it actually offer us? I'm a little confused because it seems like if they have the initialization vector and they have the ciphertext.
Yes. What can they get?
Then they get, well, they don't get the block, but they still, even if they just have the ciphertext versus having the initialization vector and the ciphertext, I don't see what the difference
There's no
is.
difference, so we assume that they can have it because in order to transmit this message, we have to send the ciphertext and the initialization vector. So because we're sending this over a channel that we assume can be snooped, we assume that the adversary knows both. And then we can say, well, the security doesn't depend on them knowing both, which is fine.
But it still doesn't solve the problem of the chosen plaintext attacker.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Those would be other problems, yeah.
Why wouldn't we send the IV in the same way that we send the key? Or
So the key, we could establish a key, let's say at the start of the semester, and use that to send however many messages we want, and we're fine. But with this, we'd have to send an initialization vector for every message that we sent to each
Right.
other.
that makes sense.
Cool. Other things, when you're programming, anybody use a library when they're programming? What kind of libraries? Collections, what else?
Input, output.
Input, output, boost, base 64, request. Ooh, request is a good one. Do you go through and read the source code of every library that you use?
Of course.
Do you read the manual cover to cover of every library that you use?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Anybody ever use a crypto library? So a lot of crypto libraries actually, and you can see clearly from here, of the two, for security purposes, which one would you want to choose? CBC. You should almost never use ECB because it introduces these vulnerabilities unless there was some reason that you thought you had to do it, but then you have to do other ways to try to mitigate the problems there. The problem was for a long time, security libraries, if you wanted to do symmetric encryption, they would default to EBC. I'm losing my thing. Yeah, they would default to ECB mode, and then you had to set a flag on a parameter to actually switch it to CBC mode. And this actually caused a lot of problems in people using crypto libraries because they think they're doing things securely, they're not writing the crypto themselves, they're letting somebody else do it. But the problem is the API itself is poorly designed and the defaults are very poorly designed such that everyone uses the default parameters. And you know, if you write it and it works to encrypt and decrypt things, why are you going to dig in and figure out exactly which flag you should set to put it in which mode? Or maybe you're reading it and you don't know the difference. Unless you took a class like this or did your own research, how would you know the difference between electronic code book and Cipher blockchaining? So anyways, this is my mini rant on programmer usability of APIs and libraries and how they can lead to security vulnerabilities. Okay, so one of the problems with DES, as we kind of saw, the key size is actually too small. And this seems kind of crazy, 56 bits, but computers, and this was again created in '76. Computers are insanely fast, very, very, very fast. I don't know, so the key size for this, and we talked about what lengths we were willing to kind of risk. So when we talked about, let's say, if you think back to like 1976 and you said, okay, I want a key size that's going to keep my data safe for whatever, a year or 2 years or something. And you did that computation in 1976, or let's say 5 years or even 10 years. What are you basing those numbers on? The what?
The speed.
The speed of the current computers and how fast they can compute DES. What are you not keeping into account?
Future.
The future, how fast computers can get in the future. And I don't, somebody can look up when Moore's law was first stated. Does anybody know Moore's law? Does anybody know the real Moore's law and not the incorrect interpretation of it? So what's Moore's law that you've heard?
1975.
75?
Yeah.
Right about then? Dang, okay, cool. What is it?
That transistors will like be small or not. They'll be able to have like double the transistors
In the same amount of space. Yeah, so it used to be for every 18 months, I think. So the colloquial thing of this was every 18 months, CPU speed would double, right? And this is an exponential growth, which is very fast, right? So, and so if you don't keep that into mind when you're developing something like this and saying like how fast CPUs are going to get in the future, they could reach the point where now people can brute force this. Or what if I just buy 1 million computers and have them all running in parallel, brute forcing a key, right? That could be something I could do if I was a government agency, maybe with enough money. So anyways, the real Moore's law is that for the same, like the density of transistors basically doubles every 18 months, or did. I mean, anyways, now it's super complicated, yeah.
For the DS key size,
Yes.
does that mean, like, what would the so like when it eventually became obsolete, about how long would it take to brute force the keys?
That is a great question. I do not know that off the top of my head. I bet now, especially with like a GPU and stuff, you could brute force it pretty quickly. I think, let's see. I mean, definitely with a desktop or a laptop, you can brute force a 32-bit value. I think 64-bit is also within the realm of possibility, but I'm not 100% sure. So that would be something to look into. Oh, cool. Well, here we go. So the other thing, wow. So yeah, it seems like a really big number, right? What is this? 72 million, billion, trillion, quadrillion? Is that actually true? Or did you just make that up?
No, it's true.
Okay. We'll take your word for it for now. So in 1998, the EFF, the Electronic Freedom Frontier, so they built, I believe, a hardware-based DES cracker for about $250,000, and they broke a key in 2 days. That's a pretty good number point. And then it's been getting more and more easier to break DES. So now this group, I believe in Germany, built this machine in 2009. They used 120 FPGAs, so for only $10,000 was able to break DES. And so this idea, this is what I mentioned earlier, is that in the 1980s, public researchers discovered this idea of differential cryptanalysis, which is basically a way in statistics to understand what bits, I believe, of the key affect what bits in the cipher text from the plain text. And so if it's not fully distributed, you can break things this way. And this is what I mentioned earlier, that our initial version of DES was vulnerable to differential cryptanalysis, but the NSA actually helped them tweak it and fix it. So it was withdrawn as a standard. And so then what do? So this initial version was just prepared by IBM, submitted for standardization. So it's clear that the writing is on the wall, even around this time. And even before you get to the point where you can build a machine that cracks it in 2 days, you can see that computers are getting so fast that it's within the realm of possibility to break a DES key. So what do? Yeah.
No more encryption.
No more encryption? You outlaw encryption? It's a whole other issue I won't get into. Yeah.
You can increase the key size?
You could maybe increase the key size, but the algorithm is actually really tied into the key size. So you'd have to have some way to, I don't know, do that. And then what if you introduce a new problem? So maybe your key size is larger, but you tweak DES in such a way that now it's weakened to these new types of cryptanalysts. You throw a contest. You have a contest, and you say, let's, so this led to the introduction of the Advanced Encryption Standard, AES, and the whole idea was they held a contest, and they said, cryptographers, design your best algorithms. The multiple groups proposed algorithms, and then they held basically like a breaking contest, and said, okay, now everyone analyze these algorithms, and let's see which one's the best out of all of them. So it was standardized in 2001, and so you can see it was like a 5-year process that involved 15 different competing designs. It has an 128-bit block size, so why is having a larger block size important?
You can have a larger key.
Maybe you can have a larger key. Yeah, it kind of depends on the key size. Yeah, I mean, that would make sense. Like the key size needs to be roughly equivalent to the block size. Also, you can encrypt more stuff with less operations, maybe, especially as these chips move. So like especially if you're doing CBC, what's your limit on how, like, what can you do? Can you do this step before this step? No, you have to do it sequentially, right? So you're actually limited bandwidth-wise by the size of the block size and how fast this encryption algorithm is. So you can go faster if you can ingest more at once. So the nice thing about AES, you actually get to choose a different key size from 128-bit, 192, all the way up to 256-bit keys. So, and then of course this is again, and remember this came kind of, the standardization effort came from the government, and the whole idea of DES was to encrypt unclassified documents. So interesting thing to note here, like the design and strength of all key lengths of the AES algorithm 128, 192, 256 are sufficient to protect classified information up to the secret level. Top secret information will require the use of either the 192 or 256 key. Oh, and this is a super interesting thing. The implementation of AES and products intended to protect national security systems and our information must be reviewed and certified by NSA. Oh, that makes sense. Cool. So basically saying, like, if a government system is going to use AES to encrypt secret or top secret data, then they are going to review that implementation, which again shows you the problems that can come up between the algorithm itself and the actual implementation, right? Cool. Super interesting. So Intel, at a certain point, extended the x86 architecture. There's now an AES instruction to do. So why is that important? Yeah.
To do it quickly.
Do it quickly on the chip in hardware, right? You can do a software thing, or you can have the chip do the AES instruction itself in a lot less time because it can optimize it, it can do things in parallel, it can do all kinds of cool stuff. There we go. Okay, cool. So we were not going to get into AES. You can think of it very similar to DES. It's just a different box, but it still has the same fundamental property. Blocks of 128, key size of one of these 128, 192, 256, and use it in either ECB or CBC mode. And there's a few other ways, but we won't go into those at all. And again, it has complicated, it's all just transpositions and replacements, just like we saw, but I guess, I don't know, very complicated is probably a good description of it. So, we're going to talk about something really quickly, and we're going to think about, so what if I sent, you stole a message from me. It said, well, that's dumb. All right. Whatever. It actually doesn't matter. And you know that this is a... So, if this is a Caesar cipher, what can you do if you know it's a Caesar cipher? Brute force. You try all possibilities, shift it, try to see if this matches up to any word. What if I told you it was a Visionaire cipher of key length 4? Brute force it? So what are you going to get? So you could brute force it. Can you brute force a 4? Yeah, it's pretty easy. It's just...
4 Caesar ciphers.
Yeah. So brute force it. Yeah.
It could be any 4-letter word.
Why?
If it's a Visionaire cipher.
You just choose a key and it can make it any word you want.
You can choose a key and make it any word you want. Right? So I can make it say Adam, I can make it say, I'm running out of 4-letter words. You can make it your favorite 4-letter word, whatever you want it to say. Right? And why? The question is why? Why can you make it any possible word you want?
Because you don't too short.
Let's go back.
Key size is the same as the message, so every single letter is.
The key size is the same as the message, which means every letter independently has been shifted and there's no relationship between any of the letters' movements. Right? So there's no way, you can't do any, there's no statistical, assuming the key is relatively random, or the key is random, there's no correlation there. And if you're brute forcing this, you will have no way of knowing which of the 4-letter words it is. Yeah.
No. Do we need like more information about like the intent of the message?
Maybe. Yeah, I mean, maybe you have that. I mean, fundamentally though, even making all the assumptions we've already made, that it's in English, that it's likely a word, you still can't break this key because there's, I don't know, the number of key possibilities is the number of not only 4-letter words, but 2-letter words, or 3-letter words and 1-letter words that make sense, right? And how you know from that universe of possibilities which one it is? You fundamentally won't. This is why this is a fun game. I should have bet you that you couldn't guess the key. Because whatever word you say, I'll just say the key is something else. Right? You'll never win this game. So this is kind of nice though, right? So why don't let's say I want to send a 10-letter message. Whatever. Yeah, that's ugly. Okay. And that doesn't work. Okay. And the core idea was, so if you knew that the key length was 4, but there were 8 characters, could you do something?
Yes.
And what about 16?
Yep.
Yeah, but what if the number of characters in the message is 8, but the key length is 8? Same problem, right? You still can't brute force that or learn what the plaintext is. This seems great. Did we just solve cryptography?
No.
Why not?
This was made by human and humans.
Oh, I'm perfect though. I do it great. I'm just kidding. Yeah.
Now we need a new key for every. If we don't have a new key for every message we send, then we're vulnerable if we have an attacker that has all the ciphertexts.
Right. So now if you stole another plain text with the same 4-digit key and it was whatever something, you could then XOR or shift, find out what the shift between those are, do something to figure out the key maybe. That could give you, then you'd see what shifts in here and what keys in here are 4-letter words are likely. Right, so reuse of the key becomes a problem. What if I want to send an 100-character message?
You need to somehow communicate a 100-character key
I need to somehow communicate an 100-character key
securely.
so that nobody else can see it. But if I can do that, then I can actually use this. And so this is going off of those ideas, this is the idea behind a one-time pad, where the idea is if you can use a key that's the same length as your message, you can actually use a Visionaire cipher or just the XOR cipher that we're using, and you have an 100% provably secure communication message for as long as you have that key. But, yeah.
I was going to say, can't you just tell the message then?
Exactly. Then you have this problem where, well, you have to tell the message, and you have to make sure you never reuse that same key. What other things do you have to do in order to do this correctly? So you have the initial problem of, man, if I have to use a key that's the same size as the message, why don't I just send them the message over that same channel that I'm transmitting the key? What are some other things? This could be nice though. What if yeah.
There shouldn't be a pattern with the keys.
The key needs to be completely random. It can't have a pattern. It can't just be Q, W, E, R, T, Y. That'd be bad. But what if I was able to give you a gigabyte of a key, and then I could just send you messages using that key? And so I can send you up to a gigabyte of data, but at that point we need to start over and I need to give you a new key. Cool. So it seems like this is like a crazy just academic scheme, because this is something that academics love. It's provably secure. You can prove the security here of this communication thing. So is this never used? It's just completely in the realm of, yeah.
I believe the Soviets make pretty use of this, actually.
How?
Well, before they would go somewhere, they would have literally 2 pads that were the same, and they keep it in a secure location. Unfortunately, once they ran out of entries, they'd have to meet up somewhere and exchange 2 pads.
Yeah, so it's actually used a lot in all types of military and spy intelligence gathering operations. And then they would actually do like code books, like entire books of literal just random characters. And so then they would make 2 copies of this, they'd send one out, and that way they could communicate securely. But yeah, it's a huge pain, right? So you'd only use this for the utmost, and then of course then if somebody steals that code book or that key book, you're hosed, right? So you have to make sure that that remains secret, and that's difficult. Yeah.
Just have a question about the previous slide.
Yep.
Is it possible to have a key larger than the block size? You have 128 block size. You have 128 92.
No, so for AES you have to, you have to follow these parameters because that's the only thing it's been studied under. So for AES you'd have to use a 128-bit block size, but you can use a 256-bit key. I don't know how it works internally to do that. You'd have to look that up, but it does work. Anyway, so 110 pads, super cool, actually used, but a huge pain to effectively implement. Hello. Okay, so what are some of the main drawbacks of the crypto systems that we've seen? Yeah. The same key? Why is that a problem? That seems awesome. Yeah.
You need a way to securely transmit that key.
Yeah, you need a way to securely transmit that key. So can you conduct? So think about you want to go buy something from a company on the internet. How does that happen? Like, what are the mechanics there? Yeah.
You exchange a key.
Yeah, but how do you, so you're using symmetric encryption. You've never been to this place before. You have your laptop. It's transmitting over some hops to them. Any of those routers on any of those hops can see your transmission. If you're on a public Wi-Fi that doesn't have a password, anybody can see the transmissions that you're making. So you type in your credit card number, hit enter, it's going to send that credit card information. Or even worse, it would send a key across, and then they would use that to encrypt communication with you. But if you're sending the key across on that same channel that you're talking to them, what's the point, right? So symmetric cryptography really can only be used if you can establish a relationship with somebody and transmit a key in an out-of-band manner. And but there's often a lot of times where we want to talk to somebody securely, usually on computers over the internet, where we've never talked to them before. There's no way for us to establish a key with them. And it really becomes kind of a chicken and an egg thing, as we've just keep going back to. Because in order to securely communicate, you have to transfer a key securely. If you can transfer a key securely, why can't you just communicate securely that way? And so this is the main problem. Luckily, math comes to the rescue. And there's the development of what we're going to call and talk about as asymmetric cryptosystems, or a different thing. So the idea is, and this is kind of an insane idea when you think about it, because intuitively it doesn't make sense. Intuitively, the idea of keys makes a lot of sense because we have locks, we have doors, you have the key, you can get into the door. And the idea was, and this is what people and cryptographers, mathematicians, computer scientists were struggling with, is how can you encrypt information without requiring a secure shared secret key? It seems crazy. It seems like, I don't know, it seems impossible. Like it's crazy. I don't know, this is part of why I like teaching this, is because it's crazy that any of this actually works. And they're actually able to do this, and the whole idea is essentially at a high level thinking about, rather than having one key, that's essentially the master key, every party basically has two different keys, a public key and a private key. So Alice and Bob have public keys, and Alice and Bob have secret keys. As the name implies, who should you tell about your public key? Everyone, the public. Who should you tell about your secret key? No one, absolutely no one. Only you should know about the secret key. What about Bob? Should Bob know Alice's secret key? No, very different than symmetric crypto, right? You had to share a key with them. But here, everyone has their own secret keys and their own public keys. And another way, and actually the main way, I like the term asymmetric cryptosystems because it and that'll be clear in a second. It contrasts with the symmetric crypto systems, but public key crypto or public key cryptography is the main way of discussing this. So the whole idea is we're going to start with an exercise. Ooh, not that kind of exercise. Okay. It's going to require a bit of visualization, and it doesn't translate super well into there. Okay, we're going to assume that we have a box. All right? I have a box. We'll use this box. It's a super awesome, super awesome box, but it has a key like you haven't seen before. It's got a key, so most keys are lock, unlock. This has 3 different states. We'll talk about what they mean in a second. I'm going to cheat a little bit. Okay, there we go. Cool. Yeah, that makes more sense. Okay, they do have, the sides are going to be locked, and the top is going to be unlocked. Okay? Makes sense? So when the lock is in the unlocked position, the box is open, anybody can open it, and the box has 2 things. So, let's say I have 2 keys, but these are very special keys that you're not used to. Okay, I have 2 very special keys. One is a key that will only move the lock to the right. Does right make sense here? I was going to do clockwise, counterclockwise, but it's only a half circle, so I think we're okay with right and left. And does this actually work? Yes. Okay, perfect. I got to make sure it works with where I'm doing it and here. So the right key only moves the lock to the right. Can the right key ever, so if the lock is in the far rightmost locked position, can I use the right key to move it to the left to unlock it? No, absolutely not. These are special keys. Cool. And my left key can only move it to the left. So let's say, for the sake of argument, that I am going to keep my left key entirely 100% to myself. None of you have access to this key, but I'm going to make a copy of this right key for everyone in this room. Okay, so let's think about this. I put a secret message in this box, and I put it in the unlocked state, and I put it in the middle of this room. And then I walk away. Say I do this before class, none of you see any of this. So you come in, you see Adam's special box on the table. Who wrote that note? How do you know? I just told you? Come on now. Maybe somebody stole the box from me and it was unlocked and put it here and wrote a message and put it in there.
Because we can turn the lock to the right and do a double key.
The lock is in the unlocked state. The box is in the unlocked state. There's a note in it. Yeah.
We don't know it was
Okay, let's think about this. Yeah, so let's go on to this. So the box is in here. Who wants to be the first person to walk in the room? What's your name? Joe. Joe? Say Joe walks in the room. He sees the box there. So what are you thinking that you know about the box and the note contents in that box?
I can assume that the note was, if it's Adam's box, I can assume that the note was written by Adam, but I'm not 100%.
You think it's likely, but it could be mine, could not be mine. You don't know. You sit down. Who's the second person that comes in? Yeah, so you come in. What's your name?
Josh.
Josh. Josh comes in. He looks at the box. He looks at Joe. He looks at the note. So what do you think about that?
I think that maybe he had something to do with the note.
Yeah, who's to say he didn't take the note out and write his own note and put it back in? Or it could have come from me, or it could have come from somebody else. And the third person can do that, and the fourth person, and the last person in here has no idea of what's in this box, right? Because at any point, anyone could have changed and edited that logic. Everyone agree with that logic? So all agree when this box is unlocked, nobody knows what's in there. Okay. Now, let's say I wanted to write a note, and this is breaking down a little bit, but that's okay. So I want to write a note. We'll go with poor Josh because he didn't know who was doing and messing with these notes. So now I want to write a message that says, let's say class is canceled, everyone gets extra credit into the box. And I want you to know that I'm the only person that wrote that message. So what do I do? So I take the box, it's in an unlocked state. What do I do with that box?
Lock
Was it? I lock it, there's nothing in the box. I write the note, and then what? I put the note in the box, and then I turn it with my key so that currently the lock is in an unlocked state. I turn it to the left, and then I put the box in the room. Right? So now you all get here. Let's say you all wait for each other. You're all here in the room. Is there anybody that you trust? Well, I guess it actually doesn't matter. So because you all have identical copies of this write key. So how can you prove to yourselves and each other that I was the one who wrote that note?
It has to be locked in one person unlocks it.
So you know that it's because it's in the left position. The only key that could have put the lock in the left position is my key. Can any of your keys do that?
No.
Because your key only moves the box to the right. So then how do you read the note?
Put in your R key and then turn all the way to the...
You turn the right key, you turn it to unlocked, and at that moment you know 100% I wrote that note, or you know, more technically, the person who has this left key wrote that note, and then you can read that message. Let's say one of you, well, I won't go with the dark example, wants to, the box is on the table in an unlocked state. You want to write me and only me a note that says one of your classmates deserves extra credit because they're super awesome and they helped you to study for the exam or whatever. So you write up this note. How can you do that in such a way that I know that nobody else can see that note?
You lock it to the right.
Lock it to the right, so you take the note, put it in the box. You'd lock the box to the right. And then now can any of you open that box?
No.
Even though you have the same key. None of you can open that box because it's always in the far right position and you can't possibly turn that box anymore. So then I can take that box, turn it 1/4 back to unlock to open it up, and now I know that, do I know who wrote the note?
No.
No, but I know what?
Just one of us.
I know it's one of you or anybody that had this, and I knew it was only meant for me, and I know that the only people who've seen that note, well, like, I know that nobody was able to tamper with that note when it went in, let's say that, right? Because I know nobody else was able to open this box.
Unless the person who put it in forgot to lock it.
Yeah, unless that, but I would, well, exactly, that's their problem. But even if somebody tampered with it, I know once they put it in and locked it, that nobody else was able to mess with that box or change the contents of that box. Cool? So this is public-private key cryptography that we just figured out very easily. At a high level, it is incredibly, I wouldn't say simple, but the concepts here are fairly clear in that this left key is my private key, this right key is my public key, and basically I can encrypt something with my private key such that any of you can check it that it was encrypted with my private key with my public key, but you can't forge something with my private key, and vice versa. The other, yeah?
So if you wanted to like keep something private to yourself, could you put something in there and lock it with the public key?
Yes, if I wanted to keep something for me that only I could unlock, because I have a copy of my right key, I could put it in the box and move it to the right, and then know none of you can undo that unless me with my secret key. Exactly. Yeah.
Do you know when the box is turned with the private key?
Nope. I mean, well, in this example, no. Right? So we don't know that, but we can examine the box's state. And the other important thing, is there really any difference between this right and this left key? What if I swapped it around and said, I'm going to give you all my left key, but my right key I'm going to keep for myself?
It would just switch the states.
It would just switch the states, but fundamentally everything still remains the same. Right? I can still put a message in that box such that you know it actually came from me, and you can put a message to me that nobody else can mess with. And these are the fundamental properties. So even though we're going to use this kind of terminology of public key and secret key, in almost all crypto systems, they're essentially can be interchangeable, which is nice because they're not special. They're special in what you do with them. The public key you give to everybody, make sure everybody knows it and has it, and the private key you always keep secret. I guess sacred if that's also your thing. Cool. Okay, so this actually, and actually I stole this from somebody online, this analogy that I really like. So you can go check out the full blog post if you feel like you want more explanations here. But I think this has a really good analogy for the idea of having separate keys doing different things, and that allows you to build a crypto system such that now, even if I don't know you, as long as you have my public key, you can send me a message and I know that nobody else messed with it, right? Cool. So, from what we got super cool security properties. We got confidentiality. How did we get that? So what aspects of confidentiality do we get? Yeah.
Only openable by people that we give our public key to. That's true.
Okay, so going back to the analogy, if I put a note in there, encrypt and turn the lock with my secret key, and I put the box in there, what does that mean? Right, so it doesn't give me confidentiality because anyone with my public key can read that message, right? So there's actually no confidentiality gained there because my public key, let's assume everybody in the entire world has a copy of my public key. But what did we get confidentiality from?
If someone locks it with the public key, then only you can open it with your private key.
Exactly, so if you wanted to send a private message to me that nobody else could read, you would put it in the box, encrypt it with my public key, and now, even if you use the public key, you cannot read that message. You cannot open the box except with the private key, which is the one that can open that box and read the message. So we get two cool properties, and hopefully you can see that if we all have public-private keys, and now we get to move away from the boxes because it gets very confusing if you have too many boxes around, but if we all have public-private keys, if I want to send you a message, I take your private key, or your public key, encrypt a message, send it to you. And if you want to reply back to me, you can take my public key, encrypt a message, and send it back to me. Yeah.
So is there, like, in the example you just gave, you kind of said, like, your public key and my public key.
Mm-hmm.
So there's, like, two sets of public keys in that sense, or is it just
everything? So every entity involved here will have a public and private key.
Okay.
The private key they never share with anyone. The public key they share with everyone. Exactly. Cool. We also, how do we get non-repudiation? What does that mean? Somebody refresh our memory. It's been a while and it's a big word. Yeah? Scratching?
Can't say you didn't send it.
Yeah.
You can't say you didn't send it, right? So for me, sending a message, if I want to send a message to somebody, or let's say everyone, how can I make sure that nobody else can read it? Yeah, or that I can't claim that I didn't send that.
I mean, if you're the only one that has, like for the key analogy, if you're the only one that has the key that turns left,
Mm-hmm.
and we all walk in and the box is locked to the left, then
You can all see that I'm the one who put that in there. Nobody else could have possibly put a message in there, right? Awesome. Cool. Okay, and maybe what should be, this is actually kind of it's a weird intuitively obvious thing that has crazy ramifications. But if I'm giving you all my public key, what should be true about that versus my secret key? They shouldn't be the same, for sure. Definitely. Yeah.
You can't derive one from the other.
Yeah, you can't derive one from the other. So you shouldn't be able to take my public key and be like, oh, here's Adam's secret key. Right? That would be bad. If you could figure out from the shape of the key how to make the key move the other way, that would be very bad, because now the fact that I'm the only one who knows that secret key is no longer true. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on like P versus MP? Do you think P equals MP or P not equal to MP? And if P equals MP, do you think we should be taking steps to like find alternatives to public secret key encryption in case it is proven?
So a lot of things in there. In general, I know the like RSA style security, which deals with factoring numbers, is not resistant to quantum cryptography.
Okay.
So I know in that sense they've already moved on to like types of public private key crypto that are resistant to quantum cryptography. So in that sense, I think we sidestep it. I don't know. I think my money's kind of on a P is equal to NP, but we can't ever calculate it really well. Like it's going to be some kind of thing that doesn't actually help us.
Theoretical, but not.
Yes, exactly. Like it'll have some crazy high constant, or I don't know, something.
Okay.
But that's my completely uneducated guess. So don't quote me on that. Okay, so this is actually pretty easy requirements that we've derived just from talking about this in class. So it should be, yeah.
So how do you know who wrote the message?
Ah,
Everyone has one.
cool. So great. So think about this, that situation, right? I get to the box. I see that there's a message for me. How will I know there's a message for me?
It's locked to the right.
It's locked to the right, which means nobody has messed with that message since it went in the box. So I unlock it. I look at the message. How do I know who wrote that message?
You can put his name on the message.
They can put their name. Do you guys lie and put wrong names on things all the time? I mean, not you personally. But
I mean,
You
you
want
know.
that unlock where each of our keys turned it in a different direction.
Yeah, or it gets more complicated, but we'll get to that in a second. So you need to think, and we'll see that we can actually use these two properties to build systems that allow us to do that. The way to think about that is, if I have your key that turns your lock, your public key, you could get a box, unlock it, put your node in there, put yours to the left, then put that box in my box, put that to the right with my public one, and then I could open it up, see, oh, this is just for me, it's not been tampered with, and I take your box out, and I see, oh, this is your key, unlock it with your public key, so I know that you're the one who put that node in. So yes, you can get that. We'll go over it again. This is, gets a little crazy, but again, these are basic building blocks, and it's just make us that you just have to keep in mind who has what and what does that mean. So, and the important thing to know is that everybody knows everybody's public key, including the adversary who's trying to snoop on this conversation. Cool. Okay, so we'll use this notation going forward of a message. So Alice uses Bob's public key to encrypt a message to get some ciphertext. Alice sends this ciphertext. Bob can, so, okay, we'll go back. So then how does Bob read the message and go backwards? Bob uses his secret key, and you can think about encryption. I mean, it's really, we'll just talk about it like this. I mean, encryption, decryption, it's essentially the same thing here. So Bob then uses his secret key to then transform C back into M and to see the message. And so now it's worth thinking about, at this point, what does Bob know is true about this message? Yeah.
It was meant for Bob?
It was meant for Bob. Does Bob know that Alice sent it?
No.
Does Bob know that Eve sent it? No, knows nothing except that at this point, Bob is 100% certain that the message was meant for him and has not been tampered with since that message was created. Cool. Okay. All right. So we'll stop here and we'll continue on with public key crypto.